Alright, this week gonna go get into Volo's Guide to Monsters. This is another guidebook, sort of like Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and the Monsters of the Multiverse. So this one, as the title implies, is a guide to monsters. So Volo is a NPC from the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. So he's on par with another NPC called Elminster. Those two tend to have a rivalry between them. So Volo is an NPC who's can kind of traveling around the realm, and he gives insight to the different types of monsters that you'll encounter. So this is the whole concept of this book is going over several different monsters that you're going to encounter most likely. So typically it gives a good index. So it starts off giving descriptions of several different types, and also gives several different types of monsters as well after. So what it starts off with, the first part is these are the ones that it goes in depth on, like beholders, giants, gnolls, goblinoids, or your goblins, hobgoblins, and your bugbears, hags, kobolds, mind flayers, orcs, neon teeth. So basically, a lot of the monsters that the DMs go to for encounters, combat encounters. So it starts off with the beholders. So with this first chapter, it actually goes in depth on each of the races that I just mentioned. So it gives description of like you can see in intellect, how they're born, the different types of descriptions of different types of beholders. Actually, it describes how they live as well, and also gets into descriptions of the actual beholder. So you could in a sense create your own type of beholder using these tables and everything. So you could in a sense get it down to describe it down to a T. So also gives an idea on how to role play a beholder as well. So and again it gets tables and how to build a beholder, and gives traits and basically the whole personality of beholder that you're using. So guess it's the battle tactics of the what the beholders would use. So and it gets into the in a sense goes further in depth in that by using different ideas that you can use. So I said, this first part is very in depth view of the monsters that of these monsters that you most likely would use or come across. And so it also gives varying abilities of the magic. So the previous pages gets into the magic that the beholders use, because they tend to be more the magical side of types of monsters, where the goblinoids coming up would be more of your martial type of NPCs or monsters that you fight. So this does give an idea of how a beholder hive would be laid out in so in a sense, it would have his own chamber and outlying chambers to kind of get anyone that serves him for in a sense chambers for them as well. So it gives a description on the type of treasure that you come across fighting a beholder. It also gives tables to use for the people that would actually serve the beholder. So like I said, this whole first chapter goes in depth on the monsters that it mentions. So for instance, now getting into giants, usually when I think of giants, most people probably know at least know of Norse mythology, and of course the giants are pretty much big in the sense that they're the enemies of the gods and everything. So and they in Ragnarok, the gods and giants go to battle and everything. So this gets into depth the creation of the giants, and then it also gets into the different types going through these. It describes like different types of giants, plus like the different types of items and stuff that you use. So like for instance, like the start off with like the cloud giants, and of course it gets into like all the subsects of the different types of giants. So like you can get in like for here like in a sense like Surtur and the fire giants. Also get into the frost giants, and of course like it gives like a good pictures of like of different types of like giants as well. And of course like probably like the most one of the most common ones that DMs probably use is the hill giant, and that's probably one of the most common encounters that you get across when dealing with giants. Of course like of course giants, they tend to be higher challenge rate, and so they tend to be more like powerful type of creatures that you fight. So that pretty much, like I said, pretty much goes. This goes into depth on each one of them. So like again, now getting into like gnolls, it goes further in depth for gnolls. So like these gnolls would be like I mentioned that tend to be more like martial related, whereas like the beholder tend to be more magical oriented. So this goes in like again, just like the giants, it gets into very good detail of like the Knoll culture, like how to run them, how to play them, and like how to run encounters with them. So like this is like pretty much like the whole idea of this guidebook is going like pretty much like giving like the whole 9 yards for the types of monsters that you most likely would encounter, and like the most common, at least the most common ones. So like for instance, now next up would be the goblinoids. So like I said, the goblins, the hobgoblins, and like the bugbears. So like this like I'll keep mentioning is like it goes like pretty much in depth on like all of them. So like you can see up next the hobgoblins, like I said. So this, in a sense, like you could use this book as like a addition to like go further in depth on like these monsters. So you could, in a sense, like use one of these as like use this to kind of flesh out like the main villain of the campaign using any one of these that's in here. So like you can see here, it gives a description of like a camp for like the what could be like a goblin, hobgoblin, or a bugbear camp, whatever they use as maybe as like a main center for like the marauders or bandits that like or maybe like attacking like the local towns, and this is their like main center, and so like the PCs could use like be hired to attack their main war camp there. So of course also like the next one up is the hags. So like what comes to mind for me is like running like a swamp encounters, or like going into like a swamp environment when you're using the hags. So like again like this is like would go fully in depth on the hags to be able to give you like as a DM an idea of how to run them as like the big bad evil guy or whatever. So of course like as a PC, also could give you ideas on actually how to run maybe these creatures as the actual PC, so you're not doing like the traditional elf, dwarf, human, halfling, gnome, or whatever. So, and of course, like kobolds are also like a kind of like a low level type of like a character that you can run your PCs against, and of course they are more reptilian. So like of course they could also be like theorized that they're descendants of dragons type of deal. So like they give a picture of like the cobbled layer, so like they tend to be subterranean. So this is a great thing about this book is that like these creatures, it actually goes, like I said, very in depth on them. So like you could in a sense run a whole campaign based around just these. And of course like also like one of like the best villains you could probably have is like the mind flayers, because like they tend to be like very intellectuals. Of course like with them, it also introduced psionics, which like is different than like your typical arcane or divine magic. So like it brings out like a whole new concept, and so like it also gives like you get a bunch of like scary images that you can use too. So and like before, they also give like a the layer or colony or like a or whatever you want where they reside type of deal to get like to be able to flesh it out even more. So this is like the whole first chapter. So like and of course you get, also orcs are another common one, and so like you can see like each race gets like several pages to go in depth with them. And of course, now we got the Tanarooks or the demons. They're type of demons. So like they mentioned that with orcs. So like of course, with the orcs getting into like their god Grumsh and everything. So like of course you could tie that into. So like again another like idea for like a stronghold or a lair or however you want to use it. So that this first chapter is, like I said, the very in depth of the races that it goes into. So this way, it gives you even like a benefit of being able to go very deep on each of these races. And like I said, it also gives you the option that like a player could come across, and it's like, oh hey, here's a bunch of ideas, and here's how I could create a character for this type of creature or whatever. So like this next chapter, chapter 2, actually does get into that. So like he goes into like several different ones that you can actually use. So like Asimir, Goliath, or another one that's been become quite popular. So this chapter pretty much goes into like the depth on how to, like I said, I mentioned, on how to create characters using like your abnormal character races. Because the normal ones, like I mentioned, would be your elf, your dwarf, half a gnome, human, and so this one gives you more options, like to kind of like broaden the horizon on like running like maybe like a different type of character. So maybe if you're someone who's bored of running the typical character races that are out there, this gives you the option of being able to pick different types of character races as well. So like in a sense, like you can see the Triton here. You can also like maybe run a campaign based an aquatic campaign based in the sea, run using Triton characters. So there's like goes into depth on how to do all of that for all these races. So then chapter 3 is probably the shortest chapter of all of them, and it gives you, just like the monsters manual, it gives you different different monsters that you can use. So like it expands in a sense on the monster manual to be able to like as a DM use this to increase your ability to run encounters and everything. So it gives you more, in a sense, it gives you more weapons to throw at your PCs and everything. So this is like I said, probably the shortest chapter out of them all. In that the first 2 chapters go like this. The first one goes in depth on like your stereotypical villains, like your orcs, your goblinoids, mind flayers, beholders, giants. So this one just gives like the typical brief description like you find in the monster manual of like new monsters that you can run your PCs against. So of course, like get in here, like you can see like gets into giants. So it gives like different variants of the giants that you can run against. So and the Flint here is the different type of gnoll. So like this is like a great thing about like this. It gives you like more options. So like when I see this, I think of like I don't know if people remember the cryptid, the Wendigo. This is what this one comes to mind when I think of that. And I see that. So this like I said, this 3rd chapter, I reiterate again, is kind of like the shortest one, and that it just gives like a typical like monster manual description of the actual monsters that are in here. So it does give you extended version of like a, or I should say, gives you more options for monsters that you can run your PCs against. So this one is a relatively shorter book compared to like some of the other ones. Now, necessarily, I wouldn't say it's necessary to run a campaign. It's just one of those optional ones that you can add on to your campaign that gives you even more options. So, like when I've said before, like when it comes to these books, all you really would need to play would be the player's handbook. Now, the starter sets are a great way to kind of whet your appetite and getting started. To run even more like after you get the starter set, because that would only run you several sessions, would be the player's handbook. Now, the DM would also want to get the monster manual and the DM guide, of course, but those, like I said before, aren't necessary to run in a campaign. And these, just like the other guidebooks I've gotten, this one isn't necessary, but it does give you a lot more options to run in the campaign. So like it's one of those things where you spend, say, I would say $75 getting the player's handbook and a bunch of dice and everything. That would be a great way to get started, and then go pick up books as you go type of deal as you get further into the game. And so this is yet just another book that a guidebook that you can get that could add benefits and like more options to your campaign and your not just your first campaign but many campaigns. So like doing the usual flip through, you can see the typical races like that you find yourself up against, like the orcs, the goblinoids, the mind flayers, beholders, giants. It goes very in depth on that, so you could in a sense run a whole campaign against those. Plus it gives you, like in chapter 2, the whole option expands the character race options for PCs and everything. So in a sense it expands that as well. And then, I guess, you saw in chapter 3, it gives you more monsters, just like descriptions that you find in the monster manual, to give you even more options of monsters that you can run up against and everything. So this is like a relatively shorter book for guidebooks, but it's like a, while not recommended, it definitely, like the other guidebooks, definitely helps in expanding the options for the campaigns that you would run. So that and if you're running a D&D campaign, along with the other guidebooks, these are great resources. So I'll mention, if you definitely go deep into the game or anything, these are definitely worth getting into. So that way, like I said, it expands even more options, and you could end up like using these to play for years, if not decades, and everything. So like I mentioned, this is just yet another guidebook that you can use to expand your campaign as well.